So today, as a continuation of the course, Sec 303, we proceed with theoretical basis of student learning. In the first lesson, we talk about your preparation for teaching in the university or in secondary school or in primary school, as the case may be. That's okay, that for you to prepare how to teach, you need to be familiar with the kind of students you are going to meet in terms of being academics or otherwise. And then you should be able to align your teachings, your teaching learning activities with your learning outcomes, as well as the assessment in such a way that meaningful learning will take place. So then we move on to beliefs of some teachers when they get into the classroom. Now, when teacher gets into the classroom, there are three levels of thinking about teaching. The first level being the lowest level, which is when you focus on students, on student characteristics, student individual differences. For every failure in the classroom, you blame the students. You don't query your teaching approaches. Rather, you blame the students for any shortcoming in the classroom. So that was the case of teachers who believe they are the sole authority in the classroom and the students don't know anything. Their responsibility is to impact the knowledge, as they usually say. And we said that was the lowest level of thinking about teaching. The second level, that is level 2, is to focus on what the teacher does. What you do as a teacher in the classroom takes precedence over the individual characteristics of the student in level 2. So in that level 2, you teacher in level 2 put together different approaches to teaching. They put together different methods of assessment. They put together different methods of interacting with the student in such a way that the learning will take place. We also mentioned that is an advanced level compared to the first level, but yet we still aspire for a third level, which is when you focus on what the student does. What the students are doing in your classroom take precedence in level 3 over what you do and individual characteristics of the student. And we said that level 3 is what you should aspire to be. You should aspire to be a teacher in level 3 who concentrate on the happenings in the classroom, what the students are actually doing when the lessons are going on. But now, if you are convinced that you need to focus on what the students are doing in the classroom, then it is necessary for you to know how students learn. I repeat, if you agree that you need to focus on what the students are doing in the classroom, then it is necessary for you to focus on on how the students learn. How do they learn? And the essence of this particular lesson is to address that question. So we shall look at different theoretical explanation or different rational explanation to describe how student learning takes place or how students gain knowledge in the classroom. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the purposes of learning theories in education, especially with reference to the teaching of computer science, and you should be able to critically analyze specific learning theories, including their strengths and their weaknesses. All right, so to get started, I think this one should not be, I think that should be the theoretical basis of learning. So computer science teachers should understand that learning theories explain how individuals and groups acquire knowledge, skills, values, and behaviors. Okay? If you are not hearing the audio, kindly check your phone. Maybe your volume is low, and I think the audio is good for everybody now. So learning theory explains how individuals and groups acquire new knowledge, skills, values, and behaviors. All right? And then it encompasses various approaches, such as behaviorism, cognitivism, or cognitive psychology, constructivism, and sociocultural theory. We shall explain one of these after the other. So the main goal of learning theory is just to understand processes and conditions that facilitate or inhibit learning in the classroom. So the whole concept about theory in theory of learning, or some people may say theory of teaching, but in any case, talk about theories in education, is all about providing rational explanation for how learning takes place and what is learning in itself. Okay, so we have some purposes through which we implement, or we take as a framework learning theories. So the first purpose of learning theory here is to understand how individuals learn and develop new knowledge. So what kind of explanation can you give to how people learn? What kind of explanation can you give on how knowledge develop? So a purpose of learning theory is to provide this explanation. Another purpose is to explain observed phenomena in teaching and learning process. Why is it that Tima is doing fine and Alex is not doing good in your classroom? Then, what kind of explanation can you give to this observed phenomena? So then you call on to learning theory. Another purpose of the learning theory is to identify factors influencing the learning process, such as motivation, prior knowledge, interest, and so on. So what are the factors that actually influence the learning process? Then our learning theories will provide you some answers to this. Then what kind of things can you use to predict possible occurrences based on preconditions? What kind of explanation can you give to prediction of possible occurrences based on preconditions in your classroom? So learning theory will also serve this purpose. It also guides the development of instructional strategies and materials. Now, how do you organize your teaching? How do you make some materials available for your teaching activities or for your learning activities, as the case may be? What kind of material is going to put together, or the approaches you want to use for teaching? So learning theory will also guide you in choosing this. Then it will also guide you in evaluating the effectiveness of existing methods and programs. Okay, we talk about inquiry-based mathematics or inquiry-based computer science education. So how can we evaluate the effectiveness of these approaches? We talk about online learning, we talk about blended learning. So what kind of framework can we use to explain the impact of this on student learning? Learning theory will provide you that kind of framework. Learning theory will also inform the design of educational technology and online learning environments. Okay, like this particular classroom now, we set it up in such a way that we have a kind of blended form. We have online a week, then we have theory, and that week, physical class, and that week. So what kind of framework can we use to design this kind of technology? Then we can have a kind of a background from learning theories. Okay, so these are the major purposes through which learning theories can put into place. It can also be used to understand the individual differences, of course. Learning theories can be used to understand the individual differences. And it can be used to support diverse learners. Yep. It can be used to support diverse learners in the classroom. So what kind of things can you put in place? What kind of interventions can you put in place in such a way that you carry everybody along? Learning theory will provide that kind of framework to do that, okay? So these are the major purposes of learning theory. Good. One of the basic theory we talk about is the behaviorism. In the first or second slide, you will see that we mentioned some major theories, and one of them we are starting with is what we call behaviorism. So what is behaviorism? So what is knowledge in behaviorism, or what is learning in behaviorism? How can we gain knowledge in behaviorism? What are the strengths of behaviorism? What are the criticisms of behaviorism? And how can we mend these weaknesses of behaviorism? So we shall take through this one after the other. After behaviorism, we pick cognitivism, and then we pick it on and on like that. All right. So what is behaviorism? So behaviorism focuses on observable and measurable behaviors for learning and then human development. The focus of behaviorism is on observable and measurable behaviors for learning and human development. It was developed by a lot of people. We have Watson is one of them. We have Skinner, and so on. We have operands and so on and so forth in the 20th century. In fact, this happened to be the baseline of rational explanation to observe phenomena in the classroom. By the way, when I say rational explanation to observe phenomena in the classroom, that is a short definition of a theory. A theory is a rational explanation, or I say a learning theory is a rational explanation of observed behaviors in the classroom, in and out of the classroom. Okay, so one of the pioneer of this rational explanation, one of the pioneer of these theories are actually John Watson and B.F. Skinner. Okay, so and they came up with this idea of behavior, that learning is all about change in behavior, which I get there short. So, and they emphasize a lot on external stimuli and reinforcement in shaping this behavior. So let us focus on what we see that the student display after a learning activity. Let us focus on what we see that the learners display after teaching learning activities. Then the behavior, as their behavior change before and after the activities, then we'll talk about this in the behaviorism. Okay, so basic principles in behaviorism, which we shall take note, is that the process of acquired knowledge and the role of conditioning. Let me go back to the definition of learning theory. Someone asked that question quickly. So learning theory, as I mentioned, is a rational explanation. Learning theory is a rational explanation, okay, for observed phenomena in the classroom. Learning theory is a rational explanation for observed phenomenon in the classroom. You can extend it in and out of the classroom, wherever, but learning theory is basically a rational explanation for observed phenomena. Okay, so what is learning? How do we define learning in behaviorism? Okay, so behaviorism defines learning as a change in behavior. From the word behaviorism, behaviorism. So behaviorism is all about, learning is all about a change in behavior in behaviorism. So learning is a change in behavior resulting from experience and external stimuli. This is what we define learning to be in behaviorism. Okay, so learning is observable and measurable. Since we focus on behavior, then we should be able to see, okay, after some time, the student that cannot say A and B now can identify letters. Okay, after this primary school, the student that cannot write anything, now it can write an article. It can write a composition. So you can see this is observable. We can see what the students are now able to do in which they were not able to do before the teaching learning activity. So learning is observable and what? And measurable. And then we can measure, we can give them a test and see whether they will pass or not. Okay, so learning is what? Observable and then measurable. Again, so behaviorism studies, because they believe it's all about changing behavior, and so they study behaviors objectively. It is right, wrong, can do, cannot do, can lift, cannot lift, can program, cannot program. Okay, focusing on external and directly observable responses. So how do we now gain knowledge? How do we acquire knowledge in behaviorism? Knowledge acquisition is through conditioning, and we have two of them. We have the classical conditioning and we have the operant conditioning. So the association of neutral stimulus with an involuntary response is what we call the classical conditioning, while reinforcement or punishment behaviors to influence or reoccurrence of a behavior is what we call the operant conditioning. You will see we are going to apply this in computer science very soon. Okay, so example, positive reinforcement in computer science education. Like for instance, when you are playing a game and then there are some element of the game that will say, oh, hooray, oh, you won some stars or something. So that's the kind of reinforcement. They are meant to induce you in order for you to repeat and to continue to play on the game. So the same thing in your test or an exam. When you write a test and get A or you get B, you are motivated to do more next time. And when you get F, at times it can be a punishment for you. So this kind of reinforcement, positive reinforcement, is the idea is all coming from behaviorism. Okay, so we gain knowledge through conditioning in behaviorism. So now in computer science education, we can apply behaviorism by setting clear objectives, by breaking down our tasks into manageable steps. That's why in some CS courses, you see that they break them into modules, module 1, module 2, module 3, in which there is a link between all these modules. Okay, the positive reinforcement for collaborative coding projects and problem solving. I just mentioned that you can get some stars when you're playing a game, or you can get some reward when you write your code correctly. Then you can also use drills like repetitive tasks, okay, to reinforce coding skills. Now you have coded this, code it again, give you another code of similar difficulty, code it again, and so on and so on. I want to believe that is how your Java course was taught. Then we have some weaknesses. I think the weaknesses we can talk about, there should be some advantages. Yeah, the strength. So we have the strength being the fact that you can only concentrate on what is observable, on what is measurable. Maybe it is easy for you to see, oh, now you can write now, oh, now you can do this now, which you cannot do before. Okay, so that is the strength of behaviorism. You don't talk about something that is happening in the brain that you cannot see, or something that is happening on the mind of the student that you cannot see. You only concentrate on what you can see, and that is it's kind of strength. However, behaviorism focuses on behaviors, observable behaviors. What about the things that cannot be observed? Like the internal processes of the student, what the student understand. And at times in STEM education, for instance, or when we talk about human beings generally, we are different from animals because we are intelligence, very intelligent beings. And then we have consciousness. We can pretend not to display what we know. You can hide your knowledge. And this is a very tricky area. When somebody asks you, can you code in MATLAB? Even though you know it, you may say, no, I cannot. You can decide not to showcase that knowledge that you have through your behavior. And according to behaviorism, they only want to see the behavior. They don't care about what you hide or what you don't hide. These animals don't have it. But for humans, we have consciousness. And at times, some students, they can even display what they don't understand. So this is a big question around behaviorism. When you concentrate on behaviors alone to grade your students, you'll be making a serious mistake. Because not all learning are elicited through behaviors, and not all elicited behaviors come from learning. Some people may behave as if they know something, whereas in essence, they don't know that thing. So this area is very tricky when it comes to what? Behaviorism. And then when you reduce everything to behavior, we say you are a reductionist. Or when you say, okay, it must be measurable, it must be right or wrong, correct, incorrect, approve, disapprove, then we say you are deterministic. Because knowledge is a kind of continuum in the latest theory, as we can say. But how can we mend these weaknesses? We can integrate with cognitive approaches. We can adopt a balanced approach that takes into consideration behaviors and non-behavioral patterns. Then we can also encourage activities that stimulate internal reflection on what you have known, internal, we call it metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, or internal cognitive processes. Okay, so now that's for behaviorism. Then straight away we go to cognitivism. So because of these criticisms of behaviorism, people were tired that, not like, for instance, attitude now. You may be given some attitude that is false, especially for some of you who are married or you are dealing with ladies. You find that they give you some kind of attitude that is fake. She want to say this, but she's saying another thing in a different manner. So how can you now know the truth? Then you'll be confused at the end of the day. So this kind of criticism actually eats behaviorism very hard. And then some theories came up with another rational explanation for observed behaviors in the classroom, for observed phenomena in the classroom. And then we have the cognitivism. What is their own idea all about? So for cognitivism, they focus on mental processes in learning and knowledge acquisition. And they came as a reaction to behaviorism. They went into internal cognitive processes, not only your behaviors. And then to them, learning is an active process involving mental processes. Learning is an active process involving mental processes, not behavior any longer, but what you have in your head. whether you behave as if you have it or you behave as if you don't have it, but what you have in your head is what we are interested in. Then that is cognitivism. So to them, they emphasize your memory. What can you recall? Attention. What can you pay detailed attention to? What can you do? Perception. How do you feel about these things? What is your notion about this? Then problem solving. How can you think critically to solve problems? Okay. And then understanding is the basic trait in cognitivism, not just behavior. So understanding is a key aspect. The knowledge is gained through mental processes. And how do we do that? Active processing, organization, and integration of existing cognitive structures. So in your brain, they believe you make some kind of manipulation of your mental codes, or they call it mental schemes, through which if you pass through a teaching learning activity, you can reorganize what is in your mental senses and then have some latest one, or you can redevelop the old one, or you can discard the old one, as the case may be. And that will be through the process of accommodation and assimilation, as we shall see very soon. So in the CS, we can also take advantage of cognitivism by designing activities that involve active problem solving and critical thinking. Because when you have to solve a problem or when you have to think critically, there is no way you will not activate your internal processing schemes. Then interactive learning environments like coding project and discussion in groups, either virtual or non-virtual, all these kind of things can also be kind of application of the cognitivism. So we now emphasize understanding over memorization. Is what you understand. Tell us what you understand, not just what you memorize. Okay, then the strength, of course, because we focus on understanding, we don't focus on behavior again. Rather, we focus on understanding is a big strength of behaviorism. But again, maybe we can say because what is happening in your brain is difficult to measure. Yes, this is a big challenge. What is happening in your brain is difficult to measure. Then we can say this is a weakness of cognitivism. Because what is happening in the brain, though we now have some latest technology through which you can look at the brain of people and see what is actually there. And they are using this now in some security personnel for tips, interrogating tips. When they take some criminals and they interrogate them, they can scan through their brain and know whether they're saying the truth or they're lying. Okay? So the prospect of this is you can integrate other theories, not just based on cognitivism. You can bring in socio-constructivism. You can bring in even what we call socio-cognitivism, as we shall see very soon now. Okay, then you can also utilize technology. Yeah, like I mentioned, there are some technology now you can use to measure what is happening in the brain. Yeah. Okay. So we can pause a little bit and then we look at these interesting questions and see what we can gain from it. The very first question that is here, it says, what is the fundamental focus of behaviorism in understanding learning? You don't need to be told that the fundamental focus is what? Behavior. And who were some influential psychologists in development? B.F. Skinner, Watson, and so on. Operant. Then another question says, describe the meaning of learning in behaviorism. What is learning? Learning in behaviorism is nothing but a change in behavior due to experience or external stimuli. That of experience, that is a classical conditioning. External stimuli, that is what the operant conditioning. So describe the meaning of learning in behaviorism and the two types of conditioning involved in knowledge acquisition. I just mentioned the classical and the operant. Another question is, how can behaviorism be applied in computer science education and what are its strengths and their weaknesses? I give you a slide on this, so you check. Another question is, in cognitivism, how is learning defined? It's all about the organization of mental processes. And what role do mental processes play in learning experience? So this is another thing you can think of. The last question on this slide says, explain how cognitivism can be applied in computer science education and what are some strengths and criticisms associated with this theory. And this is a typical question you can find in your CA or in your final exam. So I'm giving you 1 minute now to look at these questions before we proceed with, I think, socio-cognitivism. 1 minute. Okay, so we can proceed. Yes. Socio-cognitivism. Remember, the core cognitivism, they talk about what happens in your brain. They neglect any social interaction and they neglect any emotion. Even if they know that learning does not take place in association, you still have to be in isolation. You still have to be in the classroom before learning can take place. But all these social, whatever, they don't care in cognitivism. They only focus on what happens in your brain. So, and people, they were criticized for this, that you cannot just neglect social aspects of human interaction. You cannot just neglect emotional feelings of the students or the teachers or the surroundings and the influence all these things have on the memory. Okay? So maybe when you think about it, you get for somebody who asks about the question 1, when you think about it, perhaps you will get it. Okay, so then came another rational explanation for the observed phenomenon of the classroom, which they call themselves the proponent of socio-cognitivism. And then we have some influential guys there. So what happens here? This socio-cognitivism, it integrates cognitive psychology with social learning theory. We don't based only on what happens in the brain, but rather we also take into consideration the social environment of the individual. As we all know, learning happens in a social manner. You cannot just learn on your own. Now you're interacting with your teacher, is social. You're interacting with your colleagues, is social. So social cognitivism came with this idea by bringing together cognitivism and then social learning theory. And what did happen here? We have Albert Bandura, is a very powerful guy there, he's still alive, emphasizing the interaction between cognition, now behavior, and then social factor. 3 things. Social cognitivism is bringing in 3 things on the table. What happens in your memory, the behavior that you elicit, and then your interaction with your environment. Okay? So now learning is an active process within a social context. Learning in social cognitivism is what? An active process within a social context. Take note. They emphasizes observation, modeling, and social interaction. Observation, you observe your teacher doing it, then you will be able to do it. Modeling, you model against the examples of your teacher so that you'll be able to work on your own exercises or classwork. Then by the time you're interacting with your colleagues, you are discussing and sharing ideas on what you don't understand before. So they emphasize observation, modeling, and then social interaction. And again, knowledge is gained through the dynamic interplay of 3 things: cognitive processes, or we call it personal factors; social influences, or we call it behavioral factors; and then we have the environment. So all these 3 things come together that shape the way we learn in social cognitivism, how we gain knowledge in social cognitivism. Okay, then in applying this in the CS, this is what we are moving towards. Now you can create kind of collaborative learning environment for joint problem solving, like you are going to do in this course. You will be group very soon. I think from next week, I will check your registration details and then group you, then you know your group, and then you'll be assigned a task where you will work together, make a lesson, a micro teaching on it, and also make a multimedia video on it. Okay, so you can also have group projects, peer programming, and online communities for social interaction. Some of you have WhatsApp group where you discuss some courses or some difficult problems. At times, some of you organize tutorials for each other where you come together and then you crack some past questions for a particular difficult course or something like that. So this kind of things we are engaging in what we call what comes out of social cognitivism. okay, that you need to interact. Modeling and demonstrations for understanding complex programming concept is another application of social cognitivism in CS education. Then the strength being that it emphasizes social interaction, reward relevance, and learning from shared experiences and interactions. This is very important because for we human beings, we like to interact. That's why social media is filled up with millions of subscribers. You cannot just sit in your isolation, and in fact, it is even against your health for you to be in isolation. That can lead to depression. It can lead to so many other problems. So we humans, we are social in nature. We like to interact with each other and with other things in our environment. So this is a strength. Why also there is a limitation to it? Because now we are talking about social, talking together, interaction. What about individual differences? Some people, they are very reserved. They don't like to talk in the public. They just like to do their thing quietly and secretly. While for some people, they are very lousy. You can have them in a red theater and be hearing their voice in HOD's office in science education because of the kind of loudness. They just talk, they speak loud, and they want to announce their presence anywhere they are. So these individual differences, now you are bringing everybody to the same table. You have to be socialized. Then you may be doing some harm to some people who like to do their things secretly. And at the same time, because of the complexity of social dynamics, social affairs change here and there, now and then. So if you have to catch up with that, then it's going to be complex for you in your teaching. But again, there are some ways around it. You can employ individualized instruction. If you identify somebody in your class that like to do his thing on his own, you can have individualized instruction, and you can employ technology. Ask him to just read the slides, give him the lesson notes, give him the questions and stuff like that. So even though if it's not taking much in the classroom, when it gets to his place where he works alone, he has all the materials to deal with the knowledge, with the learning content. Then it can also facilitate social interaction for those who like to work on their own. We just mentioned some basic theories. We have mentioned now behaviorism, very interesting theory, and the oldest among all of them. Then we also measure cognitivism. We mentioned cognitivism. So that came as a reaction to social theory and to behaviorism. Then we mentioned the social cognitivism, who came as a reaction to criticisms of cognitivism by bringing in social learning theory into it. Now, another theory we shall consider, still in that cognition aspect, is what we call the distributed cognition. From the word distributed, this one also came as a reaction to cognitivism. Remember, cognitivism says learning is all about your mental processes. Any other thing, they don't care. And social cognitivism says, no, we can still talk about social interaction while we are not neglecting the internal processes. We can talk about behaviors while we are not neglecting the internal processes. So they brought in behaviors, they brought in social interaction. So for distributed cognition, they have a different rational explanation for observed phenomena. And what is their own rational explanation? They said, cognitive processes are distributed. Cognitive processes, they are distributed across individuals, across tools, and the environment. Individuals, that is for personal sake, tools, the instructional materials, the technology in the classroom, the writing pad, the chalk and the board, the projector, tools, and then what? The environment. How do you organize the classroom climate, the student-teacher interaction, distributed cognition? Okay, so they expand the traditional cognitive theories by considering cognition as a collaborative process. You see that now? So now they are moving away from individualistic, deterministic, reductionist to a more broad concept, okay, of collaborative process. So collaborative and interactive learning process, that is what is their own theory is all about. And then it involves individuals, tools, artifacts, and when we say artifact here, we are talking about tools the same way. We can use both tools and artifacts interchangeably. All right. So while the artifact at times can be physical tools and it can be mental tools, it depends. Okay, like the science, the language, and stuff like that. So co-construction of knowledge through social interactions. This is their own strength. Now, when we talk about knowledge, how do we gain knowledge? We co-construct it. We construct the knowledge together. And we shall move on to a big theory of what we call constructivism. So this particular distributed cognition is like taking the keyword in another theory and brought it to theirs. But what we want to say in essence is that you work together to generate or to create your knowledge through social interactions. Let us also have a little break, and then we have some questions that can challenge our memory as we move down the line. So the very first question here says, what is social cognitivism and how does it integrate cognitive processes with social learning theory? Very nice one. Okay. The next question there says, in social cognitivism, how is learning viewed? What is learning? Learning is what happens in a social context. What is learning? And what role do observation and modeling play in the knowledge acquisition process? What role do they play? How can social cognitivism be applied in teaching computer science? And what are the strengths and criticisms associated with this theory? This is a very fantastic question. Define distributed cognition and explain how it expands traditional cognitive theories in understanding learning. Okay? Define it and explain how it expands traditional cognitive processes in understanding learning. The next one, in distributed cognition, how is learning gained? That is, how do we gain knowledge? You see it? And what role do external tools and resources play in the learning process? These are some nice questions for you to ponder on. Again, I will give you another 1 minute to just scan through this question before we proceed. Okay, so far we have spoken about the behaviorism. We have spoken about the question 3. What happens to question 3? How can social, what is the question? Let me read it. Question 3, nothing is there. How can social cognitivism be applied in teaching computer science? And what are the strengths and criticisms of associated with this theory? Okay. So this is a very direct question. Maybe I'll give you another 1 minute to read through it. Okay, I think there is not much to ponder about there. It's clear enough. So far we have spoken about, I still have some kind of applications of a distributed cognition. Perhaps we skip this. You can design your learning environments with collaborative problem solving when you're applying distributed cognition. Remember, in distributed cognition, learning is distributed across individuals, tools, and the environment. So when you bring in your learning environment, you have it collaborative, then you'll be fine. group programming projects, collaborative debugging sessions, and interactive technologies can also be some kind of applications of the distributed cognition. And then we have the strengths and their weaknesses and how you can bypass these weaknesses. Okay? Yeah, criticisms is the same as weaknesses. Okay? So criticisms is the same as weaknesses. When you bring out the weakness for something, if you bring out a weakness from something, you have criticized that thing. Okay? So take note of that. All right. So when I talk about the another theory, very big theory and very influential theory, which we call constructivism. You see, so far, we have behaviorism, is standalone, and it was the hot cake, okay, in the olden days. Then came cognitivism. We can see the three. From cognitivism, you have social cognitivism, you have distributed cognition. All these, their root is cognitivism. So then we have another explanation, which is on the a different tradition or a different stream of learning, which we call constructivism. This one, they don't use the cognitive terms. The rather they talk about the constructivism. So what does it mean? From the word constructivism. What is learning in constructivism? Who are the influential guys in constructivism? So constructivism, they view learning as an active and social process. And you have some influential names, Jim Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. So for Piaget and Vygotsky, these are two pillars of constructivism. And in fact, they have two different schools of thought, as we shall see in constructivism. So learners construct knowledge through experiences, reflection, and social interactions. You construct knowledge. Now they are bringing the word construct. You see? So you construct knowledge in constructivism. All right? So that is their own rational explanation of how you gain knowledge, by constructing it through your experience, your reflection, and then your social interaction. I want to call your attention to something here. If you look at experience and reflection, these two, they are talking about personal, individual. And then the last one is talking about group interaction. All right? This experience and reflection, they are coming from Piaget. Experience and reflection, they are coming from Piaget. That is the philosophy of Piaget, that learning is about constructing knowledge individually based on your experience and your reflection. Individual. While for Vygotsky, it moves away a little bit from that and say learning is constructing knowledge through social interactions. And that form is cool. Okay. Then learning is an active construction of meaning and understanding. That is constructivism. It involves making connections between new information and existing knowledge. Knowledge construction is through assimilation and then accommodation. Assimilation and then accommodation. Okay, when you modify the existing knowledge, you assimilate, and when you kick out the existing knowledge and you replace with a new one, you accommodate. Okay, so now I mentioned Vygotsky and I mentioned Piaget. They both have two streams of cognitivism. The first one is radical constructivism, and the second one is social constructivism. Radical, or you call it individual. Radical constructivism. This is the school of thought of Piaget. Radical constructivism belongs to Piaget. Okay? And they emphasize individual's role and subjective experience. It's all about you in the construction of knowledge, your experience and your reflection. Okay? Why for social constructivism, this is coming from Vygotsky, and they emphasize social interaction, cultural influences, and shared meanings. So now, they don't talk much about the reflection, they don't talk much about the personal experience, rather they talk about the society, the environment, the social interaction, the culture, and stuff like that. So based on this theory, we shall also bring out some other theories, as we shall see. So, but now let's get it clear. Radical constructivism is for Piaget, and social constructivism is for Vygotsky. So how can we now apply this on your notes? I mean, your lesson notes, I have a table for you where I would juxtapose the differences and the similarities between radical constructivism and social constructivism. When you go back to the note, you get the full detail. So in applying constructivism, we can have some kind of project learning, some coding challenges, and some open-ended tasks. We can have group activities, peer programming, and collaborative coding projects. Then we can have, as educators, we can act in cognitivism. Educators actually act as what? Facilitators, guiding the learning process. You are not a sole dispenser of knowledge again. Now you are facilitating learning. Then the strength being active engagement, real-world application, and we have some criticism to lack of clear guidelines. It may be difficult. Student-centered approach. Yeah, now in cognitivism and social constructivism, we are focusing only on the student. Remember, level 3 of teaching about thinking is to focus on how or what the students are doing in the classroom, how they learn. So now this is a student-centered approach, constructivism, all right? But that could also be a criticism. It could be a weakness, because when you focus on only the student, how much about the teacher? How much about the university or the school that's supposed to provide the resources for the teaching and learning to take place? So there's also lack of focus on content. You only focus on what they do, and maybe it could be time consuming and so on and so forth. But you can mend these criticisms, you can mend these weaknesses by bringing some other aspects like scaffolding, you help your student out, or use different assessment methods. And then I also have some questions. This covers both radical constructivism, social constructivism, and even distributed cognition. So you can check this out when you get the slides. So let's move on to situated learning. Yep. So for situated learning, mind you, we are talking about constructing knowledge just a few minutes ago. And then we say we construct our knowledge. But where do we construct it? In the classroom, or when we are sitting alone? So then we have this situated learning. Now they are restricting the construction to the context in which the learning takes place. So who are these guys here? Situated learning is a theory that posits that learning is inherently tied to the context. Okay, the context in which it occurs. So for them, there could be differences in the learning and the achievement of the students if you teach them in the laboratories and as compared to when you teach them in the classroom. Because to them, learning is tied to the context with which the learning takes place. So why for behaviorism, they don't care? Just change in behavior, it has changed, fine, we are good. For cognitivism, they don't care. They only focus on your mental processing. But now they are tying it down to the context. Are you teaching with PowerPoint? Are you showing them some graphics? When you do that, learning should be different from when you teach them in the traditional classroom with chalk and board. So this is an aspect through which they explain how learning takes place. They provide rational explanation to observe phenomenon in the classroom. Then we have some names here too. We have Jean Lev, and then we have Wenger. I met Wenger before, actually. He's a very nice guy, and I have his book. So situated learning suggests that we are going to talk about another theory based on Wenger, community of practice, we shall say. So situated learning suggests that knowledge and learning are situated in and emerge from authentic activities and social interactions. Learning are situated. When I ask what is learning according to situated learning theory, There is a learning is situated in and emerge from what? Authentic activities. You are teaching coding, you need to engage the student in coding. Okay, you are teaching students how to teach, you need to engage the student in teaching themselves so that they will learn how to teach. They will make mistakes and correct themselves. You are teaching students how to use technology for their own teaching. You need to engage them. And you as a teacher, you also need to use it. You can't just speaking, oh, this is how you do PowerPoint, this is how you do Zoom, and you are not doing it. So what is it? So you don't allow them to gain authentic experience from authentic activities. Okay. So again, on situated learning, learning is an integral part of participating in real-world activities within a context. And knowledge is inseparable from the situations. They are tied together. The activities and social interaction in which it is what? Acquired. So these are some basic principles when it comes to situated learning. Knowledge is gained. How do we gain knowledge? Knowledge is gained through active participation in authentic tasks within meaningful context. And learning is not seen as transfer of abstract knowledge. No, we don't care. We deal with what you can do, what you can produce. Okay, you said you are a graduate of computer science education. Can you write this code, this Java code? Can you develop this website? Okay, can you teach programming language? Okay, can you integrate technology in your teaching? So we ask what you can do here. So learning is not seen as a transfer. Oh, you're coming with first class, and so what? First class that cannot integrate technology in his teaching, is that a first class? Okay, well, learning is not seen as a transfer of abstract knowledge, but as a process of becoming a part of a community of practice. When guy is coming with this term, community of practice, and that is a theory on its own, we shall see. Okay, so in applying situated learning, you create authentic project-based learning experience for your students. You create a real-world coding project, collaborative problem solving, and participation in open source community. You engage your students in internships, hackathons. Yes, we have cook a ton, fry a ton, dance a ton, whatever. Now hack a ton, can you hack? So, and then industrial collaborations. All right, so this is some kind of thing through which you can apply situated learning in the CS education. We have this trend. It is contextual relevance. You talk about what is relevant, what is useful, what is involved. You teach your student what they will go out and meet, not that there will be a mismatch between what you teach and what they will face in the field. Contextual relevance, and then social interaction. This encourages collaboration, shared problem solving, and development of a collective world understanding. But again, nothing will come without weakness. Nothing will come without criticisms. People will say, even though you are the best, people will still talk about negative things about you. Again, situated learning, they have a concern about transferability. Okay, when you say learning is tied to a context, what if you want to use what you have gained in another context? Will you be able to apply that knowledge? They have some reservations for that there could be some transferability problem when you tie all learning to a given context. And that may be the need for explicit instruction. You cannot just leave the student to be doing what they like. Yeah, you will get the slide, of course. So you cannot just leave the student to do what they like. You need to give some kind of direct instruction at times. And I also believe in this kind of a thing, that you just don't leave the student alone to do whatever they like. Supplement activities of the student with some kind of direct instruction. Like we did in our 208, where you have a week for you to work together on your own. I will just be watching. And then another week where I'm going to give you direct instruction. So this is kind of how you put things together in order to facilitate conceptual understanding. Then, but there are some prospects, of course. We have weaknesses and we have a way to overcome these weaknesses. You can encourage the learners to have some kind of abstract principles from their experience. They can reflect on their own. You can integrate other theories or other instructional methods into your teaching in order to overcome this. Okay. Then the next aspect of it is a socio-cultural theory. My mind is telling me that I should not go into socio-cultural theory, but let's say what we have done so far, so that you get the synergy between the lessons. We started with behaviorism, remember? We started with behaviorism, or maybe we started with what is theory and some purposes of learning theory, okay? And then we pick up with behaviorism. Behaviorism stand alone. Okay, no problem. So behaviorism are standalone. So behaviorism stand alone by telling you that, okay, learning is all about change in behavior. All right. Then that was criticized by some other theories who aspire to provide rational explanations to what? To observed phenomenon. And then they came up with what? Cognitivism. Now, let's talk about mental processes. Not all behaviors can we see. We are humans, not dogs, not monkeys, that you throw banana and start jumping up and down. You can throw banana to some people and they will not even do as if nothing happens to them. Like some of you can credit your partner and then we just ghost you. So all this can happen. Then they came up with cognitivism as a rational explanation to observed phenomena. This also came with some kind of criticisms that, oh, you cannot just focus on what happens in the brain. What happens in the brain is difficult to measure. All right? You need to consider social environment that learning takes place. You need to consider emotional feelings of the student. Then they came up with another explanation for observed phenomenon, and they call that theory socio-cognitivism. Interesting. And then some people say, okay, we are bringing another explanation to cognitivism instead of your own, and then they call their own distributed cognition. Again, they are just talking about we can add more to behavior, we can add more to internal processing. Then these guys came, Piaget and Vygotsky, and say we are bringing in a special term of our own, which we call construct. In fact, we construct knowledge. And then they came up with what we call constructivism. Piaget was in the US, Vygotsky was in Europe, Russia, thereabout. And then Piaget was developing his own. Vygotsky was developing. I was told that they met, though Vygotsky died very young, but Piaget lived very long before he died. And then, so because of the communication gap between the two of them, they developed the theories simultaneously, but without knowing what others is doing and then was doing. And they have two streams of constructivism. One being the radical constructivism or individual constructivism, where they put individual over everything that happens in the construction of knowledge. While the other, they put in the social environment, where they say social environment take precedence over individual. Okay, then we have social constructivism and then radical constructivism. Then we also have the situated learning. Okay, let's talk about the context in which the learning takes place. And then they provide their own explanation using their own vocabularies, their own ontology, their own epistemology. Ontology is actually the question of what is learning. That is ontology. And epistemology is the question of how do we gain knowledge. That is the question, okay? So now, and they have their own rational explanation for observed phenomenon in the classroom. This is what we have done so far. I think this is a convenient place to stop. And by our next class, which is on Monday, the same time, 9 a.m., we shall talk about the socio-cultural theory, which is also an influential theory that was developed by Vygotsky. Okay, and in fact, these days you find it difficult to make a difference between socio-constructivism and socio-cultural theory. All right, we shall talk about this in our next class. I think this is a convenient place to stop. So now we shall have interaction. Let me stop recording.